Hello and welcome to a conversation on a daily Bern. I'm your host, Eric Miller, joined today by a returning guest, Liam O'Mara. How you doing, Liam?
Hey, good to be back.
Yeah, good to thank you for coming back. You're running for California's 42nd House seat, California's 42nd district, right? Returning guest. You ran in 2020. You're running straight to 2022, and I want
Right.
to get into all that, which is I think just awesome. And I gotta commend you because as the intro music was playing, you were doing a little air drumming, which I think you're the first guest that got into that level. So I love it. It was great. So you're running again, and obviously a people-funded campaign, bold progressive. Go check out our former interview to learn a little bit more about Liam's background. LiamO'Mara.org. I'll pull that up a million times, but just talk to me about the motivation to keep running. You didn't skip a beat. The election was in November, and
Nope.
here you are already running for 2022. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's no, I didn't take any time off at all, and it was not really even a question of whether I'd keep at it. I mean, granted, you always hope to pull it off in the first time, but statistically, a second or third are a lot more likely because it takes a while to build name recognition, especially when you're running as a progressive and an outsider. So you don't have people dumping millions of dollars into, pushing your name to everywhere. You have to slowly build your networks, and we've been doing that. And I think that the numbers alone suggest that I really didn't have a choice but to continue pushing forward with this. We had more than half again as many votes as any Democrat has ever gotten in the area. And the largest voting block we had were 18 to 24-year-olds. So people are actually excited by what we're talking about. They're excited about the type of campaign that this is. And if we can keep people motivated and get them to turn out, but turnout for the Republicans kind of goes back to normal because Trump isn't on the ballot. Right. We've got a really serious shot at flipping this district.
Amazing. Yeah. And I want to pull up, let me just do it now right out of the gate. So I want to pull up your website, which is here. So like I said, LiamO'Mara.org, and obviously you're a grassroots funded campaign. So, any donation is going to help Liam, and the sooner you get it in, the more impact it actually has. Right. So, donate early. That makes a huge difference. And you're building a volunteer army, growing your volunteer army from last time around. But, so LiamO'Mara.org, but you mentioned a few things, and I was just looking at the numbers, and I want to kind of pull them up, right? So I looked at Ballotpedia and the results, right? So like you said, I'm guessing these numbers, you overperformed expectations. Is that an accurate statement?
Massively. Before this race here, the largest number of votes that the incumbent had ever gotten, and this is going to be his 30 years in Congress. This is his fifth win there. 15th win. The most votes he had ever gotten is 149,000.
Wow.
And we're at almost 158. So we hit our win number for a normal presidential year. It was just there. It was such a polarized time. Every possible Trump supporter came out of the woodwork, and that pushed him way above normal. But that kind of environment doesn't stick around. Right. Now, granted, there's massive fall off in turnout for anybody in a midterm relative to a presidential year. But because we had a lot of support from younger people who were excited by our platform and not necessarily just the presidential contest, there are people that we can continue to build a relationship with, excite, and come back out. And California really pushing hard on continuing the mail-in voting, that also really helps. So yeah, no, we way out. I mean, the most any Democrat had ever gotten is 104. And that was in 2016, which was also a really polarizing year for a lot of people. So nearly 158 is a pretty good jump up.
Absolutely. That's incredible, man. Kudos and thank you for, like you said, sticking to it and just keep running. Like you said, a lot of people wouldn't have that, wherewithal or that fortitude to continue running. So, thank you for doing so. And yeah, I mean, these numbers show it. The other thing I wanted to highlight, just, since I'm sharing pages and so forth, is Open Secret. So this was the 2020 cycle, right? And obviously the disparity in the money versus the votes, right? So clearly you have, people-centered grassroots, campaign, and, again, throw Liam $10, $20, $100, whatever you can, because it goes a long way. Like, you can really see the stark difference. Like, this dude raised, $1.5 million. I'm sure it was not from, $2 donations. Where does the incumbent get his money from, if you don't mind?
He's 98% funded by corporate PACs and wealthy people outside of district. It's all like Lockheed Martin and Boeing and a bunch of like real estate developers and whatnot. He does not have a grassroots funding network at all, and doesn't do anything in district. He doesn't actually have on the ground support. A lot of Republicans don't even like him. It's just that he outraises with the corporate donors, so no one can primary him. Right. They're just stuck with him along the way there. We do make a lot better use of the dollars, and one thing that I have been really trying to harp on for the last couple of years here is that we on the left really have a kind of learned helplessness about funding when we look at numbers like this. Like, oh gosh, how do you ever compete with that? Right. Well, first off, we're a much, much more efficient campaign in terms of what we do with our money. And second, any ordinary person can make a huge difference. It's not, if you've got, a bigger donation, fine, make that. But donating $5 a month, the recurring donations are the ones that really do it. Because it allows you to budget and plan throughout. And those $5 a month really add up. If you get a few thousand people, if a few thousand viewers of shows like this around the country pitched in just $5 a month, the price of one coffee, you could win almost any House race in the country. But people think that, well, I've only got $20 to spare. I mean, someone else can donate $1,000. What's the point? Why bother? And we don't do it, which is how we end up continuing to get all these corporate candidates.
Right. Can you unpack that a little bit? So you talked about the efficiency of your campaign versus the way they spend it. So this money comes from lobbyists and corporate donors, and then I'm assuming it goes to consultants and buying airtime and so forth. Can you just unpack when you said that you spend better and smarter and so forth? What does that, to a novice, what does that look like? What is, can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah. All that Ken does is takes in a ton of cash from these lobbyists, and then he buys radio ads and television ads and puts up a ton of signs and sends out mailers and huge glossy mailers, and they're expensive. And oftentimes extremely dishonest stuff. It's something he's been doing for a long, long time. I mean, running hard and negative about people in mailers. But that's all he does. He doesn't campaign. He doesn't show up in the district. He doesn't talk to people. He doesn't have volunteers. He pays companies to put up his signs and take down his signs and just runs advertising. He essentially buys that seat. And that's the kind of naked corruption we've been talking about in this country for, 150 years now, going back to arguments against the plutocrats in the 19th century owning Congress. That's all it is. 98% corporate money, throwing a bunch of ads out, and then he just coasts along safely. We take in our money and we don't pay out to a bunch of consultants because, again, consultants are the ones that tend to completely misunderstand how you should run in these districts anyway. It's like, run to the right, chase the corporate money. I'm like, no, that's kind of the whole point here. We got to get away from that. The money goes to just supporting our staff operations, paying for the materials that we need to get out there, putting, T-shirts and stickers and whatnot, putting ads out on social media, putting ads out anywhere, just, raising awareness. It's, I'd rather support the people along the way and work on the events on the ground. I did tons of events all across 2019. And as soon as this pandemic calms down a bit, I will be everywhere again. We'll be setting up our tables, pitching our little canopy with the big signs on it out there and, handing out candies and talking to people, I really want to get back to that because we actually had won over a lot of independent and self-identified conservatives when they're able to talk to me and like, oh, he's not that scary. We don't agree on everything, but, at least he's talking to me. I think that's where we need to go. And we have I mean, a ton of people in the core staff that are absolutely dedicated to making this work and putting tons of time there. We have, yeah, as you said, an army of volunteers, people who will do phone banking and text banking because they care about the message and they want change. You know, Ken is going to pay for a robocall because he doesn't have people that really care about what he's doing. So, yeah, it's a very different approach.
Yeah, here. Let me ask a little bit about, like you said, in the 2020 cycle, Trump was a motivator to, bring out Republicans from the woodwork and so forth, right? The voter turnout was high. And I think I looked at the numbers and, population in your district was it's like around 900,000 and voter turnout was like maybe 400,000. So that's a pretty high turnout if I read those numbers accurately.
Well, yeah, and obviously that includes tons of people who can't vote. I mean, the actual voter turnout was over 85%.
Wow, yeah.
Which is unheard of. It was close to 86, and like a previous high was like 66%.
Wow.
That's what you're thinking is like, okay, a really excited electorate, yeah, mid to high 60s, but mid 80s, that's all really hard to account for.
Yeah, that's incredible. So my question in that is going to be, right now that Democrats control both houses and the White House, right? They better deliver, right? Or that's going to affect that turnout in districts and races like yours, right? So what are your concerns about? They ran on the $2,000 checks, and then suddenly it's $1,400 and coming later and means tested, and they're wishy-washy. Like how are you responding to that in your campaign?
Okay, so yes and no. Part of that, it's going to depend upon, again, us just raising the money to keep up that outreach, to keep the telephones going, to keep the text messages going out, to keep the emails going out, get postcards out, keep talking to people. Because, yeah, that kind of poor performance is going to affect a lot of, the centrist type Dems who defend that status quo.
Right.
I don't. I'm comfortable criticizing any side on this. I think what they're doing with the $1,400 check thing is bullshit, frankly. I mean, it's what we should have been doing is what Ro Khanna has been suggesting, in $2,000 a month, because it actually keeps a consumer economy afloat. We wouldn't have the massive contraction. We wouldn't have the huge, losses that, I mean, I don't know. You saw how hard Italy was hit by the coronavirus. Their unemployment went up by 0.5%. I mean, we could have done so much better at dealing with this, and we're not. We're just like, here's $600, get by for the next 6 months. It's just, it doesn't work that way. Right. And I'm willing to push back hard on things like that and run against that status quo and say, look, you're unsatisfied with how things are working, so am I. But that's not an excuse to stay home. It's an excuse to get involved and put better people in there in the first place.
Awesome. How about talking about the centrist status quo Democratic Party and so forth, how were you received from the Democratic Party in the general last time? And, they would rather probably run someone like you described, a centrist. Do you anticipate getting a primary challenge and so forth? Like what's your relationship with the Democratic Party?
I'm sure I will. But again, we have the better activist base and the name recognition. So anyone's going to have a steep hill to climb to push me out of this. And the relationship, I honestly think it's about as good as it could get, because while I'm critical, I'm diplomatic about it. I'm not out there like bashing the Democratic Party. I'm saying we can do better for the American people. We can step up. And this is a challenge. This is a time for us to step up. And at the end of the day, I'm not pushing for anything more radical than say, hey, let's get back to the New Deal consensus or the progressive populist movement of the early 20th century. I mean, this is when we actually swept rural districts all over this country. And we've just drifted away from actually caring about ordinary people's lives. And I think that we really need to put that front and center and get past a lot of the sniping partisan BS. I mean, Congress deserves its low approval ratings. It really does, because it doesn't do much for the American people other than manufacture outrage to drive their own particular partisan bases. What we have to do is win over ordinary people who feel that politicians don't talk to them, that the politics doesn't speak to them. It does nothing for me. Who cares? It's just one clown or another in there. I'm like, no, it makes a really, really big difference. the California Democratic Party, really to their credit stepped up in the last race, and they put a lot of resources into helping out in this district and did what they could. The National Party, not so much, but we can always hope. But really, we do have to win these things ourselves and shift the balance of power. You get enough people in there like me or the squad, and it'll tilt the balance of power, and more people will sign on with it. And they won't be the obstacle that they are today. Everyone's always telling me like, oh, well, they can't reform. And I don't know. I'm a historian by profession. So I'm like, the party has changed repeatedly over and over again, that its basic approach, in its core leadership changes. And because it responds to a majority of the electeds that are in there. We put in more good electeds, and that changes the DNC and the DCCC. It's as easy as that. So you want to change the DNC, put more, put more people like me in the House. That's really what we got to do. So I'm actually hopeful, rather than pessimistic about it. It is a hard fight. I'm not going to question that at all, but it is absolutely doable. And sitting on the sidelines, there's no excuse for that. We have to get involved.
Amazing. Yeah. So liamomara.org. Like he just said, if you can make a $5 contribution recurring, that goes a long way, do that. And, you have mechanisms to volunteer, your platforms on there and so forth. We went into that last time, and I'm happy to go into that at any time you want, policy wise. But, is there any, this is going to be a softball, and I suspect the answer is going to be no. But is there anything that you've modified from the last campaign to this one? Platform-wise, I'm going to say no. But maybe tactically, is there anything that you're changing? Anything lessons learned that you're going to focus on this more or that less, or anything like that?
Honestly, the things that we're going to do more of are the things that I still already had laid out strategically last time to do. We just weren't able to do it. So the idea here is, we're getting an earlier start with a lot more material, a lot more people on the team, a lot more existing donors to call and beg for more. I mean, we can build up to do things that, like, we were doing Spanish language radio ads last time, but only in the last few weeks. And that has to start a few months out from it. We have to build up a lot more like that. We have to do a lot more advertising. We did tons and tons of phone banking and text banking, but we didn't manage to do as much phone banking to actual Republicans. And I think once we're doing in-person events, calling them up and building on that will actually be effective. There are people who are swayable on a lot of the issues. The policies, no. I mean, because again, for me, policy is a matter of, I don't know, basically following the evidence. I picked out what would actually work based on our own history and what's working all around the world. None of this is really rocket science. And one thing that people will always get from me is, I'm not going to pander. I'm not going to give people what they already want. I'm willing to get involved and push the conversation and say, this is what we need to be doing.
Right.
And try and shift that needle over a bit.
Right on. Yeah. So again, it's liamomara.org. Make a donation, volunteer, share this video. Like I notice you're very active on your socials. That makes a big difference. Like, keep telling Liam's story over the next, year plus, right? That goes a long, long way. And I'll certainly keep sharing your content on Daily Bern and so forth. That makes a big deal. Like rising tide raises all boats. Like, we need to support each other and so forth. So,
absolutely.
If you agree, click like. If you agree, click share. Right? It makes a huge difference. Right? All those impressions. Let's talk a little bit about what. I mean, it's maybe too soon to tell, but I'm wondering how Republicans are going to. And I don't care what Republicans generally do at all, right? I'd rather build our side, but I'm wondering in terms of like voter turnout and if they gravitate more towards, after a pandemic, after a cult of personality bubble has potentially burst in 2022, is Medicare for All going to resonate even more? Like, will they be more ripe for it? Do you have any thoughts on that notion?
I do, yeah. I have been trying to point this out to people for a long time about the whole Trump phenomenon, and trying to, especially warn liberals that this is not some kind of short-term aberration. And also conservatives, a lot of like basic mainstream conservatives are worried about the direction of their party, and rightly so, because Trump is not a conservative, and Trumpism is not a form of conservatism at all. It is markedly different, but it has captured a significant share of the base. And Trump was more popular than any Republican president in 100 years, since we've been collecting data like that. So it works. And that means that whether or not he sticks with it and comes back, and that's an open question based both on his personality and his age, but we will have someone else playing that same demagogue. I mean, that is going to win over a lot of people. It's going to draw people in, which means that just like, it's sort of an interesting point, because I'm trying to reach out to some of the same people that the neoliberals are, trying to court those conservatives, but not by being a conservative per se in terms of a lot of policy that they expect, but giving them certain things that they already do want. Conservatives do respect integrity and authenticity and moral values and a commitment to public service, which I have. I've dedicated my life to trying to help others. I mean, I actually tried to serve in the military. Even they found I was asthmatic and threw me back out after a month and a half. But I tried. It's not like I don't have that same kind of like desire to do right by my community, right, that really resonates for a lot of people. And I have had both in the last run and since Ken Calvert's vote in the sedition caucus to, throw the election out. Right. A number of conservatives in the area reaching out and talking to me and trying to feel me out and say, like, hey, is this guy scary? Well, I guess he's not scary. All right. This is interesting.
Right.
And I think that is something we can build on. I think that we used to in this country do a lot better at reaching across and supporting people that we don't agree with on everything, but that we respect their values, their integrity. We know that they're going to listen to us and work with us. I would rather have a representative with whom I had serious disagreements, but who actually showed up to town halls and spoke to me, right, than one that I agree with perfectly, but is just in it for the money and themselves and never shows up. Yeah. That's not public service to me.
Yeah, and that extends to the donation page that we just pulled up, right? I'd rather have somebody that I disagree with slightly, who's unbought and unbossed, than someone that is just speaking platitudes,
exactly,
working for Comcast and so forth, right? Yeah,
right, exactly. I'm not working for wealthy donors. I want to work for the voters. I want to work for the American people. Period. They're the only constituency I care about.
Yeah, here. Let me ask about. I think when we last spoke, Calvert was an anti-masker. I think he did some gimmick about, what's his pandemic response? Has he moved it all on that? And what's the reception in your district? Are they have had enough of that, or what's the deal with
it? Has this is something that's been a truism with him for a very long time. He tries to walk a tightrope where he winks and nods at the most reactionary elements and then tries to play the respectable California moderate. So he has actually supported he supported about half of the pandemic discussions, bills and whatnot that have come through. Mm-hmm. So he has been able to say, well, I've tried to do some things for you. And he does post things about the pandemic and, here's where you can go to get a vaccine and things like that. But then he's photographed at public events with the Chamber of Commerce without a mask in close proximity to other people. So it's like he wants to put up the image that he's not really a threat, but then he works to cultivate, yes, anti-maskers, white nationalists, all kinds of people.
Right.
It's really it's really kind of in many ways the worst you could get in politics, because he's A, entirely corporate funded, and B, willing to say whatever works to get him the most votes, and he just does not care.
Right. Yeah, that's we got a question from Lisa Aaron Sanchez, kind of talking about using, you don't want to run a negative campaign. You want to run a factual, you're not smearing him, but you can certainly highlight his record. Is there any other, anything else about his actions or inactions that you want to, highlight or share?
Yeah, and we'll continue to do that. And it's one of the reasons that I And I know a lot of people, a lot of liberals don't really like the bad nicknames, especially after like Trump and him, calling everybody things. But I have tended to refer to him as Crooked Ken Calvert for a reason. It's an attempt to build a sense of outrage among his own supporters because he has been nakedly corrupt. He has made himself a multimillionaire and doesn't live in the district. Based upon knowing what legislation is going to come along there, being able to make investments and profiting from that. There's a ton of things like that bother me. His voting record really bothers me. I don't have a problem with negative campaigning on the issues.
Right.
I will hit him hard on what he has done. I just don't do it in terms of like the person. I'm not going to.
Right. Can you highlight what's the most egregious one? It sounds like there are many. Like, what's the one that would, succinctly land the most with, if you had, 5 seconds with a Republican voter in terms of his corruption?
That he, knowing that there would be particular improvements or infrastructure coming in, like a new highway or this or that, would purchase a big old chunk of land. The bill passes, and then he sells the land completely unmodified for double the value. It's basically the real estate version of insider trading. And he has been investigated by the FBI for this.
Wow.
He's too well connected in the California Republican Party, and it's difficult to take down powerful people. But he has been repeatedly looked into by ethics committees and the FBI and whatnot here for some of this crap that he's pulled.
Right. Wow. And does local media pick up on that? Like, how's that? No.
No, not really. And it's the same with his voting record. Like, he'll say, "Oh yes, I care about the environment," and they'll say, "Yes, you care." He says he cares about the environment, and but then you look at, okay, he's got a 7% from the League of Conservation Voters. Right. He is no friend of the environment at all. They're not really looking at his voting record, like what he's done. They look at what he says, right. And that honestly is a big part of the problem that we've had with our politics for several decades. And it's really put on display well with the Trumpist phenomenon. People pay attention to what he's tweeting, not what he's doing.
Right.
And that's very much the case with Ken here. People don't pay a lot of attention to the fact, okay, so look at how many people in the area loved Trump because he did attack our constant wasted money on these foreign interventions, on our foreign wars. That anti-intervention is popular on both left and right.
Right.
Ken has voted for every single use of force because his biggest donors are the military-industrial complex. So he's absolutely, knee deep in something that really bothers a lot of conservatives, but they're not paying attention to what he's really doing.
Right. How about, you mentioned the environment and his sort of platitudes on the environment? Are fires a concern in your district? And how has he, because that's going to just continually grow. That's going to get worse. And how has he failed on that front?
Yeah, it's a big problem for California as a whole. Between my mother's cabin up in the mountains and my place down in Lake Elsinore, we have been personally affected by fire 3 times in the last 4 years. 3 different fires, the Holy Fire, the Blue Cut Fire, and then this Bobcat Fire. These things are just going to keep happening. There's no way to stop that sort of thing because of changes in our environment and just how dry California has gotten. But it's the same kind of problem with Republican priorities overall. It's absolutely something we can take care of, but we have to invest in Americans. If we're willing to put the cash in to invest in Americans and not in like the bankers and Wall Street and the military industrial complex and wars and whatnot, and actually take care of our infrastructure and our basic security and health and education, things like that. I mean, we often in California, we're literally using prison labor to put out wildfires. That is deeply offensive to me, given how little we pay people in there. I mean, I have no problem with them learning a great new career to become a firefighter afterwards, fine, but pay him a decent wage. We do it so we don't have to pay any money. And that's just messed up. But it's because they have put such a crimp on spending, and Ken has been part of that. He'll say, "Oh, it's a fire. Oh, I'm so sorry. That sucks." But it's like it's like that thoughts and prayers thing, Right. It's always the thoughts and prayers, like better luck next time. Like, okay, cool. We just lost a whole lot of houses. Are you going to help those people? No.
Right. Yeah, and those people are, Republicans just as much, the fire is non-discriminatory, right? It's
Exactly. It's not checking what stickers on your car when it burns your house down.
right, exactly. Yeah, so let me pull up the website again, and we have some people asking questions and so forth. So I usually aim for about a half an hour, but if anyone's got a question or two, let's throw them in the chat. But let me pull up the website one more time. So Liam O'Mara, it's California's 42nd. We people like the squad get a lot of attention. We added to it last time around with Mondaire Jones and Jamal Bowman, Corey Bush, Marie Newman. We have Pramila Jayapal, we have Rokani you mentioned, and the numbers are growing. And Liam is a guy that we want to get into that extended squad, right? So liamomara.org. It's 2022, but like we said already, anything you can do now is going to pay dividends even more. It's like investing in stock early. Right? So, get involved. Here's a question from Lisa. I'm not sure I can read this whole deal, but let's see.
Big sign. Yeah. The issue with signs is there are a lot of laws around them, and you can't post them early, and they have to come down right away. There are very specific times we can put them in. But we did get near the end last time a whole lot of much, much bigger signs, like the big 4x4s and 4x8 signs. But we didn't get them out right when we could have launched them because they're ridiculously expensive, and we weren't able to save it for that because we had to pay for the phone banking and text banking and everything else. Right. So this, again, is why you start early and we start building that up. We're able, and we basically can stockpile the signs when it's cheaper to have them printed and then hit them immediately the day that you can put them out. And that would have made it more of a difference. Signs they're not huge really, but the statistics do show they make a several point difference.
Yeah, especially put it in a heavy trafficked area. It's an impression of right. Roots and so forth, right?
In races this tight, when the margins are this close and the numbers of voters are this high, it makes a big difference if you're going to change it by 2 or 3%. Yeah. And signs in a lot of strategic areas really do that. So, no, we will definitely be doing more of that this time around here, but we have to plan that early.
You can just reuse the old one, just paint a 2 over the last 0. And,
yeah, fortunately, I've never used the numbers on anything. I didn't register my domain with 2020 or anything like that. Right.
I noticed that on your website. When I pulled it up, I was like, I wonder, did he change anything on this website? It's probably the same, right? I mean,
didn't have the year on it before, so.
So good. Yeah, that's so great. So, and I noticed Marianne Williamson's already endorsed you, which is great. So, hopefully,
and Blue America has, there's a number of progressive organizations that are jumping immediately back on board and willing to push hard, and I really respect that. And we're going to be reaching out to a lot of the same endorsers we had before, and I'm confident we can get them all back and continue to build on that and bring even more in because, again, we massively outperformed expectations. Yeah. And if you want to flip districts like this is the strategy to it. We lost a bunch of House seats. Every single one of them was a blue dog.
Yeah.
And a number of them, the actual vote total they had was far lower. They paid millions of dollars and they got fewer votes than I did.
Yeah.
This is the way to win over swing voters in purple districts. And we have to convince more organizations and more individual voters to throw in the cash so we can afford the phone banks and the text banks and all the nice big signs for the street corners and whatnot.
Right. Yeah. Here. And Dolores Huerta endorsed you, which is great as well. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all that stuff makes a difference. And I've been having a lot of candidates on, at this point, there's only a smattering of House candidates that are announced, right? Yourself, Angelica Duenas, and so forth, right? But there are a lot of city council seats, and I keep saying, it didn't begin and end with Trump. You know this, right? We have to keep running, and the fact that you just kept running without skipping a beat, like Corey Bush did, right? And she won her second time around. My fingers are crossed. Alex Morris run again. I hope Alex Morris runs again. There's so many seats that can be won, and we just have to get behind them, right? And we have to get, get engaged and stay engaged. I continually say stay engaged, right? So, yeah. So
we need to draw more people in overall just to get involved and to support it. Again, we often complain in the general election that we don't have good candidates, but we're not involved from the beginning in the primaries to get those good candidates. And so often you don't even run candidates. So you'll have a city with a Democratic majority, and we have several in district here that have Republican majorities on city council, because people aren't running. They're not really doing it. If we find people that are interested and willing to do it, we have to organize, get together, and support them. The Democrats used to control 3/4 of state houses, and it's just falling and falling and falling and falling and falling.
Yeah.
I mean, we have less than half of them now. And it's just insane. I mean, we need to shift that back in the other direction.
Yeah, here. And part of it is obviously not being a progressive and not taking that money, and being working class. Like, the barrier to entry is intentionally obstructed, right? So
right. I mean, this profession seems to attract millionaires, because it is difficult to do if you're not filthy rich. And I am working class. So yeah, you do have that as a significant obstacle. But here's the thing. You put enough people in with like me. We don't have to change everybody in Congress. We don't even have to change all the Democrats. All you have to do is show that the balance of power is shifting. And enough of the ones in there will jump on board, because they'll see the writing on the wall and they won't want to get primaried. And we will pass legislation to get public funding for campaigns. The corporate money will disappear, and we won't have to be kicking in our $5 or $10 a month. But the only way we get that legislation and get back to a Congress that does the people's work is if we step up now and fund these House races and state House races.
Yeah, here. Yeah, Godspeed, my friend. So yeah, liamomara.org. By all means, please come back. 2 or 3 times before your election. You're an absolute superstar, and like I said, thank you for running. And all your work here at CA-42. I'm going to do whatever I can to keep getting the word out, telling your story. And you got a good volunteer army. You got a good team behind you. I can just tell by the comments. And Jacob's amazing. So Godspeed, and please come back, and we can get into more policy. We can talk about how crooked the incumbent is till the cows come home. So
thanks.
Yeah.
And just as a last little plug here for people that are watching this and do enjoy these kind of shows, please. We are trying to grow our social media numbers and expand the platform there. And one of the ways we want to do that too, because I'm trying to think long term, right? One of the pet peeves I have about a lot of our representatives is that they just don't engage with us. They're not responsive to people. I want to create something like a regular show, like whether it's a Twitch stream or whatever, some kind of show where people can actually engage and ask questions, and then continue that not only through the race, where I can comment on any number of different things. People can just talk to me about whatever comes up. But once elected, it provides a vehicle for checking in still every week. So you have that regular town hall. It's like a nice virtual forum where I'll sit down and I will hear my constituents' concerns. Yeah. So we're going to be launching a show sometime in the next month.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, come back and talk about that. I know Ro Khanna, that's one of the things I admire about him. One of many things, he has his monthly town halls, and he's done them, via Zoom because he had to out of necessity. But if
it continue, and that is important.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. So Liam, again, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for running, and thanks for coming on to talk to me. I look forward to having you back on and supporting your campaigns through the finish line. And I can't wait to call you, Congressman O'Mara at some point. Just awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good one.